Hello, my name is Rickard, and in this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to put together this composite in Photoshop. This video is sponsored by BorisFX, the creators of Optics, a visual effects plugin for Photoshop. Now, if you don't have the plugin, you can get it at a 15% discount using the promo code nuclei-borisfx, and I've included a link in the description for you to do that. Also, if you want to follow along and do all the steps of the composite as I do them, I have included a link to all the assets, and they do also include the layers that I created with Optics for those of you that don't have the plugin. All right, once you've downloaded the assets, let's get started. The first thing I'm going to do is just set up my workspace. So right now, the workspace is on the Essentials default. But what I want to do is first change the workspace to photography. And then I'm going to take some of these panels and just move them into this sidebar, because really the only thing I want is the histogram, layers, channels, and paths, and then my tools. The rest, if I do need other palettes, I'll bring them and just dock them into this slot here. All right, so with my workspace set up, I'm going to go to File, Open. We're going to go on your computer. And I'm going to go to our tutorial asset files here. Oops. And we're going to open the Miranda 123 camera raw file. Let's go ahead and hit open. And that's going to open camera raw. Now this already has been set, but let's go ahead and reset it to the defaults. First thing I'm going to do is just neutralize it. So select this white balance selector here and just click on the background. That's going to get me to a neutral color space. Next, I want to bring up the exposure to 1.65. I want to bring up the contrast just a little bit, take down the highlights, bring up the shadows, and bring up the whites just a little bit. So that looks good. I'm going to click down here. See, it's going to be opening it in Adobe RGB, 8-bit. And it's not going to resize it. So that's all good. Let's hit open. All right. First thing I want to do is just make a copy of my background layer by dragging this down into the new layer icon. That's going to make a copy of my layer. That way I keep my background intact. Next, we're going to cut her out of the background. To do that, I'm just going to go up to Select, Select and Mask, and then hit Select Subject. Now it is selected, but as you can see, the view is not very conducive to seeing our selection. So if we go up to View here, I'm going to select Overlay. And that looks good. I'm going to click on Refine Hair. And that should do the trick. I'm going to turn on Smart Radius, add 2 pixels, and hit OK. All right, so now we have her cut out of the background. Next thing I want to do is just extend this background so that my image is 4:5. That's the portrait dimensions of an image upload to Instagram. So it's a good ratio to have our crop. So let's go to the crop tool, and up here under ratio, I'm going to go to 4:5. You can see that has cropped it down. So I'm just going to hold down Option and then snap that back to the top and the bottom, and then hit OK. All right, next thing I want to do is select the background here and go File, Place Embedded. And in here, I'm going to grab the church JPEG and then hold down Option again and just increase the size of this to about there, and then move it up, just so that none of these things here are being covered. And let's hit OK. All right, now I want this to be much more subtle as a background. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to add a gray layer on top of it. And I can select kind of a gray color that's in here. So something like this, want it to be relatively dark, and then hit OK. And then to fill with my foreground color, I'm going to do Option Delete or Alt Backspace on a PC. I'm going to take the opacity down to about 70%. And then I'm going to add a new layer, go in my gradient. I want this to be foreground to transparent, which is this one here. And then I'm going to default my colors to black and white by clicking on this little icon here or hitting D on my keyboard. So that's going to give me black as my first color, and I can just make a gradient coming in from the sides like this and also coming in from the bottom. So like that. We can call this Vignette. And then I'm going to add one more layer. And for this one, I want the middle gradient. And I'm going to switch my colors with this little icon there. And then from the middle, just hold down Shift and go out the side like this. I'm going to take the opacity down on that a little bit. And then go back onto my Move tool, do Command T for transform. Make that just a little bit bigger. Right about there. Good, happy with that. And we can call this light shaft. I'm going to take this down a little bit because I am going to bring in one more layer that's going to lighten up the background. So let's go File, Place Embedded. You're going to see this nuclear textured light, which is part of my Creating Atmosphere light bundle. Let's place that. Just going to make this bigger so that it's kind of behind her like this. And then we're going to put this on screen. So there you go. That kind of covers our background. The other thing I want to do on her, we'll call this layer Model, is I want to cut out her hands because I know that I'm going to want to add texture around her, but not on the hands. So let's go ahead and just do that now. I'm going to go on to my quick selection tool and just select the hands here like this. I don't want the arms, so just have to be careful that we're not selecting the arms there. Good, and this hand as well. And that looks good. Let's go to Select and Mask, turn on our Smart Radius, and just pump that up to maybe 4 pixels. And hit OK. And then with my layer selected, I can do Command or Control J, and that's going to give me my hands on their own layer. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is replace these horns. So let's go ahead and go to File, Open. You're going to see a horns JPEG here. Now this JPEG actually has a clipping path. So if we go in here, you'll see this misnamed clipping path, and just hold down Command or Control and click on the path thumbnail. That's going to give you a selection, and we can go onto one of our selection tools, click on Select and Mask, and just add 2 pixels of edge detection, hit OK. I'm going to do Command J again. That's going to put it on its own layer there, and I want these as 2 separate horns. So I'll just make a large marquee selection and then do Shift Command J. On a PC, that would be Shift Control J. What that's going to do is it's going to cut it and make it its own layer. So let's call this right horn and left horn. And then I can just drag this out here, go back onto my Move tool, select both of these, and then drag them into here. I'm going to hit OK. All right, so now we have our 2 horns selected. You'll notice that this is defaulted on with the Move tool auto select. I actually am going to turn that off. If I want to use an auto select, I can hold down Command or Control, and that'll let me click to select my layers. But I don't like to have it on otherwise because I like to be able to click anywhere in my image to drag my selected layers around. So like that. And let's take the left horn and place that right about here. And let's hold down Command, click on the right horn, and let's get that placed right about there. All right, so that's where I want my horns. Now we got to get these horns looking a little integrated. So first thing is, let's paint out the horn behind there. I can select my model mask, go onto my brush tool, right mouse click, just select any of these brushes, pump up the hardness, pump up the size there. And to interactively change the size, I can hold down Control and Option on my Mac and right, and then drag left and right to increase or decrease the diameter, and then up and down to decrease or increase the hardness or the feather of the brush. And I'll include the PC the PC version of that shortcut on the screen. And let's just paint out these horns that you can see in the background there. And that looks good. All right, next, let's go on to the right horn. I'm going to add a mask to that and just paint out this bone part here so that we just have the actual horn like so. All right, next, what I'm going to do is basically take this, make a copy of it, and then stretch it along the rest of this area. So let's go ahead and make a selection. I'm going to try to kind of follow some of the lines that are already in here. So like this, kind of go up in here like that. And then I can hold down Command and Option and Shift, and that's going to intersect with the transparency of this thumbnail. So when I click it, you can see my selection is now intersected with that. And with my layer selected, I'm going to do Command J, and that'll put this on its own layer. Okay, so now what I want to do is make a selection that kind of follows where I want this new horn to be. So it's going to go and basically take the place of the existing horn, but it's not going to get in the way of these petals here. So something like this. And then I'm going to add that as a mask to this piece. Now, it's essentially erased the entire thing. So what we're going to do is select that layer, unlink the mask, and then with my move tool, you'll see that it's now moving this object, but it's staying within the area that I wanted to affect. So I can drag it to the bottom there, then do Command T for transform, and put my anchor point here. So I can do that. If you don't see the anchor point, you can turn it on there and then just move it to where you want it. Hold down Option so that it's increasing the size with the anchor point there. And I'm just going to increase the size of this until it feels like it kind of belongs there. And I can also click on this warp and just kind of start stretching this out a little bit so it fits a little bit better with the existing one there. Something like that. And then maybe down here, drag it down a little bit. So just like that. And then what we can do is on this mask, maybe make a little softer and just paint in some of the original like this. And that looks pretty good. Okay, we're going to do the same thing with the other one. So let's select our left horn here, add a mask to it, and paint out the bone. Like so. And then I'm going to make a copy of this extra part here. So I can just do Command J or grab the layer, drag it, and hold down Option. That'll make either of those. We'll make a copy of the layer, and I'm going to delete the layer mask by right mouse clicking it there, and then just transform this, flip it horizontal, kind of get it into place where I think it should be. So somewhere around here like this. And then we'll start transforming it like we did the other one. Something like that. And then if I turn this off, I can go onto my lasso and kind of draw out again where I think this horn should be. So kind of going up here, I want it to cover the existing horn. So something like this. Maybe follow some of these lines like that. All right, turn it back on, add a mask on there. And that should work. All right, so now with all these layers that make up the horn, I'm going to put them all together in a group and do so. Click, Shift, click, Command G or Control G. That'll put it into a group. I'm going to add a layer and we'll call this Shadows. And I'm going to link or clip this layer to this group. So hold down Option or Alt and then select between the two and click. And then I'm going to go on to my brush tool, make sure my color is black, make sure I have a very feathered brush, and then take the flow down to about 35%, and then just paint in shadows right around where the horn meets, like so. And that looks pretty nice. And then what we can do is actually take all of these together and just convert them to a smart object, and we'll call these new horns. All right, next I want to add some roses to her headpiece. So let's go File, Open, and in our Assets folder, you're going to see this rose JPEG. Let's go ahead and open that. And here, what I'm going to do is use my Object Selection tool. So let's go here to Object Selection tool. We're just going to make a square right around the rose part here. And then go to Select and Mask. Add 3 pixels of edge detection, and then do Command C or Control C for a PC, and then Command V or Control V. All right, so we now have our flower in here. I'm going to do, we'll call this rose. I'm going to do Command T for transform. Just scale this down so it's about the size of the roses that are currently on there. We're just going to kind of cover those up like this, and then hold down Option, make a copy of that, Command Transform, kind of turn it like so. And then one more, and this one Command T, flip horizontal, and just change the angle of that. So something like that. These look a little too similar, so we'll just rotate this one even more, something like that. All right, then we'll convert all these to one smart object. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to move them down a little bit. Actually, no, let's leave them where they are. I'm going to do Command M or Control M for curve, select my gray selector and select in there, and then just bring down the darkness of these to something like that. Let's hit OK. Good, pretty happy with that. Okay, next we're going to add some shoulder pieces here, kind of make her look a little bit less petite. So let's go to File, Open, and we're going to open this feathers JPEG. This is, I guess it's the back of a turkey, I think. But we're going to use these as her shoulder pieces. So again, first thing we're going to do is select them. So we're going to use the Object Selection tool here again, and just select right around these feathers like this. And look at that. Ugh, you gotta love all the smart selection tools that Photoshop has added, because making selections has always been the longest part of any composite. And with the new tools in Photoshop, they make it so easy. All right, so let's hit refine hair. That's already going to do half our work for us. Then I'm going to do the refine hair brush, make the brush a little bit bigger, and then just paint around anywhere where it missed. It's going to be mainly on these edges here. And that looks pretty nice. Let's turn on some smart radius and let's hit OK. I'm going to do Command J. And again, we're going to cut these in half. So we'll just go to right about there and then do Shift Command J or Shift Control J on a PC. We'll call this right shoulder and left shoulder. All right, let's drag both of these into our file. And let's make them bigger. One of them about that big, I think. Something like that. And then we're just going to place these. So let's take our left shoulder first. I'm going to do Command T for transform. Kind of turn it. I want that to be almost 90 degrees. And then I kind of want this to ride along her shoulder. And I want this to come down her arm. So something like this looks pretty good. And let's hit OK. All right, and let's get the other one placed. We'll do Command T on that one as well. A little bit smaller. Something like that looks pretty good. All right, now let's go back to our left shoulder, add a mask, go on our brush tool. I want to make sure I have a soft brush. So we'll select this one and then just start painting away the edge here. I can always hit X to go back onto my white brush and paint in anything that I feel needs to come back in. That's the beauty of using a mask. Do something like this. I think that looks pretty good. All right, next we're going to make this much darker. So we're going to do Command M for curve. First, I'm just going to use my gray selector and select this. That'll get me kind of toward a blue. It's a little too blue, so I'm going to take the blue down a bit. And then go to RGB here and just make this way, way darker. Something like that looks pretty nice. Maybe it needs a little bit more yellow. So let me go to my blue, pull that down even more. I think that looks pretty good right there. So let's hit OK. And now let's do this one, the right shoulder. So I'm going to add a mask to that, go onto my brush, kind of paint out the edge until I reach the color piece there. We'll do something like this. And then I can select this. And what I want to do is basically repeat the last curve. So to do that, rather than Command M, I'm going to do Option Command M. And that'll repeat my last curve. So let's hit OK. All right, so now we have the shoulder pieces in place. The next thing I'm going to do is bring in the skull. So let's go to File, Open, and you're going to see a skull JPEG somewhere in here. There it is. And this one also has a clipping path already. So we're just going to go to our paths, hold down Command or Control, and then click. That'll make a selection. And then we can do Command J. That'll put the selection on its own layer. We can call this skull. And I'm going to make this a smart object. All right, then we'll drag this here and just drag this into our file. And we can close these other files that we have open. We don't need them anymore. Okay, so the skull I want placed somewhere right about here. So it's basically going to be kind of floating and she's going to be making it float. So something right around there I think looks good. And then we're going to use a curve to make this look more like a skull. So we'll do Command M. Let's just bring up the lightness quite a bit here. And then I'm going to go to blue, add a little bit of yellow, and then in the reds, just bring that up a tiny bit. There you go. It's starting to look a little more color, not so black and white, and we can hit OK. Okay, next thing we're going to do is add some glow to this, a little bit of a green glow. So I'm going to make a copy of this skull layer, and I don't want this one to be a smart object, so I'm going to right mouse click on the layer name and click rasterize layer. And then I'm going to do Command M on this, which is again going to bring up my curve. I'm going to really pump up the whites and then bring the blacks down. So we just have these strong highlights on there like this. Let's hit OK. And then we're going to do filter, blur, Gaussian blur. I'm going to make this about 30. Let's hit OK. And then I want to put this on screen, but I want it to be more green. So I'm going to do image adjustment hue satch, which is Command or Control U. We're going to put this on colorize, pump up the saturation, and then bring it toward kind of a toxic green color. Make it a little bit darker. So right about there. Let's hit OK. And let's do this one more time. So I'm going to copy the skull layer again, rasterize the layer, add the curve. I'm going to do Command Option M, so it adds my last curve. And then I'm going to do Command Option U so that it adds my last hue saturation. And then for the Gaussian blur, I'm going to double it to 60. Let's hit OK. And let's put this on screen. We can take this one down as well. And that looks pretty nice. All right, so now we're ready to run Optics. And Optics is a plugin for Photoshop for adding VFX. I'm going to show you how to do it. And what we're going to do is we're going to use it to add some flares and some lightning bolts here. So let's go ahead and add a new layer. We're going to call this layer Optics. And what I want to do is I want to merge everything into this layer. So I'm going to do Shift Option Command E. And now everything is on this one layer. And I'm going to go to Filter, BorisFX, Optics. Let's reset it. And then I'm going to go to Render and then select S-Zap. And under Parameters, I want to disable the 0.3 there, so it's just 2 points. I'm going to make the first point on her hand, and then the second point here, we're going to put right there. So there you can see those are the 2 points. And I want to make this kind of arc up like this. So something like that. And I want the glow color to be green, so we'll adjust that. And I also want this to be a little more branchy, so we'll add some branches here and also make the branch length a little bit longer. So something like that. And then also reduce the bolt width just a little bit. So like this. I really don't need all these points here. I just want my 2 points, so there. Now, I suppose every time I move these, if I move these, it activates the point. There you go. And now here, if I want to adjust, like if I think this looks pretty good, but I want to look at some other options, what I can do is turn off the show spline here and then just change this random seed until I get a lightning bolt I really like. So let's do that. Ooh, that one's pretty nice. Kind of want one that looks a little arcy. So maybe something like, these are a little too branchy. So let's take down the branchiness a tiny bit. Like that. About there. All right. And that looks pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. This is one of these things where you can really there's so many options that you kind of just have to decide on one and go with it. And I'm going to go with that one. All right. All right. Next thing I want to do is make a copy of this for this side. So to do that, I'm going to go in here under my effects panel, right mouse click and hit duplicate layer. There you can see it's made a duplicate of it. And now I'm going to drag this. Let's get rid of all these points for now. And this one I want to go kind of into this missing socket here. And I'll make this. Like that. And let's adjust the random seed on that one. That one's pretty nice. Good. Now I'm going to duplicate this one more time. And for this one, what I want to do is have it go from one hand to the other and kind of go through and across the skull. So it's almost a second bolt up here. So something like this. And let's random seed that as well. Ooh, that's nice. Good. Happy with that. All right, the next thing I want to do is add some flares where these are hitting. So I'm going to add a new layer here. And this will allow me to stack another effect on top. I'm going to go to light and then go to lens flare. So let's select that. And in here under the presets, I'm going to look for a green flare. And there's a pretty nice one in here called pocket camera. So we'll select that. And then in here, I'm going to put the location of it where her hand is. And I'm going to go under parameters and we're going to adjust this. So first, let's scale everything down quite a bit. Let's make sure our location here is right. And you can see that there is a second controller here, and that controls all these other elements. Now, really, I don't want all those other elements. And the beauty of the lens flare filter in optics is I have this other, and that controls all these. So I can just take the brightness on those down to 0, and that'll eliminate everything but the part of the flare here that I want. Now, if you want just a hint of it, you can maybe put it on like 0.8. I'll give you just a hint of it. But I think for our purposes, we're just going to zero it out. All right, let's make a duplicate of that layer and move it to this hand. And we can turn it a bit just so that they're not identical. Maybe something like that. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with that. Next thing I want to do is when I pull this into Photoshop, I want it to be on black so I can put it on screen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add one more layer here and then drag this layer to the bottom of the filter stack. So we're just going to drag this until the only thing that's on top of it is our original. I'm going to go to color and you'll see this color thing here. Just put that on black. And then if I go back to the top, and now we're going to hit this little gearbox here. Now, before I do that, you can always save your setup. So if you might want to use this again, you can save setup. We can put this in our assets folder and we can call it lightning. We'll replace the one that's there. And then I'm going to hit the check mark and that's going to apply it and put me back into Photoshop. Voila, I'll put this on screen. And then I can add a mask to this, select my skull here, and then just paint out in the mask where it's going on top of the skull. Like that. Kind of like it going in here, so I'll leave that. Maybe just get rid of that there. And then also maybe just kind of toward the bottom of the hands, I'm going to paint out that flare. Good, now we're going to do one more thing in optics, and that's to add some kind of rays coming out of our hand. So to do that, I basically want everything here like this. So we'll just add a temporary black layer here, temp black, fill that with black. And I'm going to turn off the horns for now. Turn off the roses, turn off the shoulders. This is essentially what I want. So I'm going to make a new optics. We'll call this optics rays. I'm going to do Shift Option Command E again to put it all in one layer. And then we'll just run a curve on this. So something like that. And then go to Filter, Boris, Optics. Let's reset it, which this little icon here is going to reset everything. And then under light, I'm going to go to edge rays. Let's go to presets here. See if one of these other ones is better. Yeah, this is going to work better as a starting preset. And we'll just take the opacity brightness down. There you go. That looks pretty good. I'm happy with that. Let's hit the check mark. And let's put this on screen. And I really just want a hint of this. So let's go ahead and put this back to how it was, like this. And I want this behind the skull, like so. I'll take the opacity down quite a bit. So we're really just seeing kind of a hint of that, like this. Maybe a little more, maybe 30. Good, that looks good. All right, the next thing I want to do is paint in some atmosphere. To do that, I need to organize my layers a little bit better. So let's go ahead and take our hands, move them up, and take all these layers that make up the model. I'm going to convert those to a smart object, and we'll call this model. And then right above her, we'll add a layer called fog. And then I'm going to go onto my brushes, and if you don't have that, which you probably don't, what you're going to do is go here, go to Import Brushes, and in the assets, select the Nuclei sample brushes, and then just scroll down to the sample brushes and select Advanced Fog 01. And with that brush, what I'm going to do is just select colors from the background and start painting in some atmosphere. So I just want to kind of break up this background, make it look more like there's a layer of fog all around here. And then use a darker color down here just to paint out the detail. I'm also going to actually paint under here. So we get just like this. And then I'm going to take a couple lighter colors, take down the opacity and the flow of my brush, just hit a few other spots here. I'm also going to take this kind of green color, make a new layer, and just make a little bit of green fog. So maybe make my brush a little smaller. So something like that. I'm going to put this on screen and then just put it right in there, and then Option, drag it, put it there as well. And that's pretty good. Now what I'm going to do is hold down, add a mask to my fog layer, hold down Command or Control and click on the model thumbnail. And then again with the same brush, just kind of paint out of here what I don't want covered by fog. So just like this. And then Command D to deselect. That looks pretty good. Maybe go back to my fog layer. Just add a little bit more right there. And then maybe a couple larger swatches down here, just to break it up. And that looks pretty good. All right, next we're going to add some rose petals. So let's go File, Place Embedded. And the first one we're going to grab is the medium size. Let's go ahead and place it. I'm going to make this larger. About like that. And just drag this over to right about there. Now I'm going to add a mask on that, and with a soft round brush, just make that smaller, bring everything up, and just paint out a few of these that are landed in front of her. I do want a few going in front, but not this many. So I'm going to leave most of them behind her. And that looks pretty nice. All right, next we'll do File, Place Embedded. This time I'm going to use the small size. Let's go ahead and place that. Let's make that bigger. And this one we're going to put behind the model. I'm going to take the opacity down on that just a little bit, like so. And then go back to the top, File, Place Embedded again. This time we're going to take the single rose petal. I'm going to place that right about there and then blur it. And I'm going to also take this, make another copy of it, make it a little bit bigger, kind of put it right about there. And then one more kind of down here. Maybe take down the blur on this one because it's a little bit closer to her, so it's going to be a little bit more in focus. And I can just double click on the Gaussian blur here and take that down to 30. And that looks quite good. All right, next I'm going to add some textures. So let's go Place Embedded. And let's go ahead and grab the dust. This is from my dust pack, which I'll include a link to in the description. We're going to put this on screen. I'm just going to add some A little bit of texture down here. This will look a little more real. Next, we'll do File, Place, Embedded again. I'm going to use the Nuclei concrete texture. We'll just make that a little bit bigger and then put this on soft light. And I'm going to take the opacity down on that. Again, this is just adding subtle texture. Next, we'll do File, Place, and Place Embedded again. This time I'm going to use the green grunge texture. We'll put this on soft light. I'm going to take it down quite a bit. Let's do about 25%. And then we'll do File, Place, Embedded again. And this one is going to just help give it a little bit of a painted look. And we'll put this on soft light as well. Take the opacity down to maybe about 50. And on this one, I don't want her face to be so affected. So what I'll do is just hold down Command or Control, click on her, and add a mask. I'm going to invert the mask with Command I. And then with a gradient, linear gradient of white, just going to make it come back in here. So it's really just not affecting her face, but it's affecting everything else. Just like that. Good. Also, now that we've added these roses, I want to make her lips a little bit redder. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down to the model layer, go on my pen tool, which is P, and make a path that follows the shape of her lips. Like so. Good enough. Right mouse click, make selection. I'm going to add 0.5. And then I'm just going to add a curve layer here. I'm going to make this a little bit darker. And I'm going to go to green, pull that down. That'll add some magenta. And I'm also going to go to blue and add a little bit of yellow. And that looks pretty nice. Now it looks a little too much, and a way to fix that is to double click here on the name of the layer. And then what we're going to do is use this blend if. So down here, I want to pull this up so that the highlights on her lips are not being affected by the curve. And then hold down Option and break this. So like that. And that'll just make the effect look a little more real. And we can also take the opacity down just a little bit on that. Just like that. The other thing I want to do is make her eyes green. And I also want this optics kind of lightning reflected in her eye. So to do that, I'm going to take my optics layer here. I'm going to just Option drag it to make a copy. And I'm going to select out kind of this part right here, do Command J. I can throw away the other one. And we'll just Command T to make that smaller. Make this significantly smaller. That looks pretty good. And let's go ahead and erase, with E for the erase tool, and just erase like this. Just get a little hint of it there. That's good. All right, so we'll call this eye reflection. I'm going to add another layer. And for this one, I'm just going to use a bright green color. Go on a soft round brush. make it really small, and then just paint in like this. Now that's a little too much, so let's take the flow down to maybe 28%. Paint in there, and then we'll do this on that side as well. And then we'll put this on overlay. That. And then I'm going to take this eye reflection and copy it over here. Maybe transform it just a little bit so that they're not identical. Like that. Good, that looks nice. Okay, next thing I want to do is some color grading and also just a little bit of adjusting of contrast. So I want to make a few spots in the background a little bit lighter. So let's go behind our model to about here, and I'm just going to add a curve layer, bring up the top of the curve like this, bring down the bottom so it's kind of adding that nice contrast like that. I'm going to black out the mask with Command Delete or Control Backspace. And then I'm going to, with a white brush, just paint in the areas where I want it to be lighter in the background here. Just a few spots, mainly up in this corner here, like that. All right, then I want to add a vignette to the whole thing. So let's go to the very top here. I'm going to go onto the elliptical marquee tool, click, start dragging, and hold down Option. So about like that. And I kind of want to transform it so that it's more like at an angle like this. And then if I hold down or click on Q, it's going to give me a quick mask, and then I can blur that quick mask. So I'm going to blur it until I don't see this edge anymore. Hit OK, and then hit Q again. So now this is a vignetted selection. I can invert my selection and then add a curve, and then just bring that curve down. So like this. And then I can make a copy of this, bring it up, and then go to my mask here and invert the mask. So now it'll brighten instead of darken. I'm going to do just a little bit of that. We really don't need much. Maybe something like that. Good, so pretty happy with that. The last thing I want to do now, actually there's one other element I want to add in here, which is kind of a light flare. Let's do place embedded, and we're going to see a Nuclei Flare 50. Let's grab that. I want to make this straight up and down, put it on screen. So kind of like this. I'm going to do Command T again, put my anchor point down here, and then hold down Option. So I want it kind of like this. I'm going to take the opacity down a little bit, and then add a mask to get rid of the ones in the center here. Like so. Good. So now we're ready for the color grade. For that, I'm going to go to Curves. And what I want to do is go to my blue, kind of lift up the bottom, take down the top. And I want to add a little bit of green, take a little bit of red out. And maybe add even a little bit more blue. Something like that looks pretty nice. I think her face needs a little more contrast. What I might do actually is just add a slight curve to her layer here. Just take down the darks a little bit like this. Let's hit OK. For the final step, I want to run optics again. So I'm going to make this. We're going to call this optics light leak. I'm going to do Shift Option Command E to merge everything onto that layer. I'm going to go filter BorisFX optics. I'm going to reset it. And then under light, you're going to see one called light leaks. So let's select that. And in the presets, you're going to see one called Joker. We're going to select that. And for this, what I want to do, let's go. Okay, so for the top one here, I want to move it up just a little bit. So it's just barely affecting the top of her horns there, like that. And then under parameters, I'm going to add a third element. It's going to add it up here for some reason. We're going to drag it. Need to grab, there you go. Okay. This one I'm going to put over here. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. And I want to change the color of this to the color of the rose petal over here. So something like that, maybe even a little more. Okay, that looks pretty good. And then what I want to do here, you'll notice that the combine mode is add. We're going to put this on leaks only and then hit OK. And then in here, we're going to do linear dodge, which is the same as add. You can see that is now there. We can adjust the opacity if we want. And my preference when working with optics is to always create the effects on their own layer. That way in Photoshop, I have the ability to adjust opacity and keep using my layer stack. All right, the final thing I want to do is just add one more sharpness layer. So we're going to call this sharpness. I'm going to do Option Shift E to merge everything onto that layer and then go to Filter, Other, High Pass. This is a great way to just sharpen your image. Let's add it like 2.5 pixels, hit OK, and then put this on linear light. And you can see here the before and the after. It just adds like a nice crispiness to the whole image. And then finally, I might want to just pump up my blue in the darks just a little more. And take down the yellow just a little more. Right about there. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that.
So there you have it. That completes the composite and completes this tutorial. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning, if you want to get optics, you can do that with a 15% discount code, nuclei-BorisFX. Also, I did mention a few overlays and packs, which you can find at nuclei.com. All right, if you like this video, please leave a like, subscribe to my channel, share this video, leave a comment, and I will see you next time. Here are some other videos to check out. Don't forget,